Okay, so let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful for all the things you teach us and for the time that we have here this morning. We ask that you can help the internet to work, that you can be with us in this meeting and in this study. We ask for your angels' care and protection. Help us to trust in you, and in all the things that we do, we ask that we can glorify you. May you help us to understand the things that we are going to look at, and may you direct us in this study. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So good morning, everyone. Sorry for those internet problems. Now, I'm not really sure how this all works, running off one computer like this. So just seems very, very odd for me. So I'm just going to see how do I do this? So hopefully the recording works well. I just don't know what it is that the recording's looking at. Maybe I'll do it this way. So this just seems to me kind of odd. So everyone's there. I can't really see anybody right now. Normally I have my screen so I can see everyone.
Yep, here. I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure what my screen is supposed to be recording. Everybody sees my the Bible, right?
I see a line. I see a line going through the center of the screen. Just a line.
So nobody sees the Bible program?
Right, it just happened just a moment ago.
I don't see it.
It's just a thin white line. Looks like it might. There you go.
Okay, so now you see the
Yeah.
Bible program.
Now we see it.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Okay, so hopefully this recording works. It might not work at all, but we'll see how that works. And it says that we're recording, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I just don't know what screen it looks at because I've never done this. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is 1 Kings chapter 12. And this has to do with Jeroboam, starting in verse 26. And Jeroboam said in his heart, "Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David, if this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord God in Jerusalem," or the Lord at Jerusalem. Then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. Whereupon he took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." And he set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. So what's happening here? Can somebody describe what this is?
Setting up a false worship in Israel.
Okay, and we have 2 places. What does Dan and Bethel represent?
The names are... Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
Dan means judgment.
And Bethel is house of God.
Right. So the one is a judge, which would refer to the state, and the other is Bethel, house of God. That would refer to church. So we have church and state. And what's really important here is looking at this history and connecting it to the history of Revelation 13 with the two-horned beast. Now, we've made that connection in the past. So we know that northern Israel is a two-horned power. But this is its rise. This would be what you call the revolution. You had a united kingdom, and that united kingdom is going to be broken. Can we look at a parallel with the United States and Britain?
In what manner?
Well, you just had, at the time that the United States rises, it's coming from this united kingdom, and it's going to then split and separate, and it's going to set up its own nation. And now this is a reverse in that this is a rebellion against God's kingdom. The other one's just a rebellion against, an earthly kingdom. But you have a nation that's rising up, and it's going to have two horns, church and state, as part of its kingdom. And just like the United States, the northern Israel has these different tribes. Are people following what I'm saying, or is there does that seem consistent?
And you have the 13 states.
Okay, you have 13 states, yeah.
13 being a number for rebellion.
Yeah, and so 13 is the number of rebellion. So there are parallels between the rise of northern Israel and the rise of the United States, which we've already noted. Now, the other thing that becomes important here is going to be the decision that Jeroboam makes. So he puts up these two cities where he's going to have these golden calves. And then it says in verse 32, and Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he's going to have this feast day. And this is the thing that we want to look at today, is these feast days and these fast days, these counterfeit days of worship that are going to be set up in the United States. And here we also have this counterfeit day of worship here. So which day is Jeroboam replacing with this feast in the 8th month, the 15th day of the month? Because it says, like unto the feast that is in Judah. And the question is, which one?
I don't know.
Would this be the Feast of Tabernacles?
Yes.
Doing
So
it a month later.
he's going to have it a month later. Yeah. So it's going to be the Feast of Tabernacles a month later. So it's going to be like unto that feast. So it's dealing with the fall harvest, and he just decides to have it a month later. Why he chooses to do that, I'm not certain. Maybe it's something to do with the climate in northern Israel compared with Judah. I have no idea. Because you're going to have the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles happening in the south a month before. But he's going to try to get the people to be involved in this feast in the northern tribes rather than going down to Judah, because he doesn't want them to turn back to the God, to the worship in the temple, and to worship, if they worship Jehovah properly, then they may link once again with the southern kingdom and want to become part of that again. So he sets up this false day of worship. So, and then it says in verse 33, so he offered upon the altar, which he had made in Bethel, the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised of his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. And he offered upon the altar and burnt incense. So Jeroboam is the king. What is he doing? Offering upon an altar. What is this?
But the priests are only supposed to do that,
Yeah.
not the king, right?
That's like a church and state combination.
Yeah. So we have this church and state combined. Now, part of this is when I studied this out, it really struck me because I was studying the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 4. And I'd already connected, this is 977 BC. I had already connected it back in 2014, that year, to the start of the 390 years that are going to end in the year of the siege. But I didn't really have an event other than the dividing of the kingdom. And the thing that I didn't have was the start of the 40 years. I didn't have an event. So I knew that the 40 years ended at the same time as the 390 years. But I didn't know why they started there. I did know that it was connected with the 13th year of Josiah, and that Jeremiah began his ministry in that year. But what I found is that this also connected to the prophecy of Josiah, which is going to happen on the 15th day of the 8th month. So in chapter 13, and again, you have this symbol of rebellion. You're going to have this prophecy. And behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. And he cried against the altar in the word of the Lord and said, O altar, altar. So one of the things that you have is you have this doubling, and we know that's a symbol of the midnight cry. Thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee he shall offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. So what's happening here? You have this counterfeit feast day, and you have this prophet come. And what is he doing?
Isn't he pronouncing a curse?
Okay, yeah. So he's giving a curse against this altar, right?
And wouldn't that be a symbol of the form of worship?
Yeah. So the altar is a form of worship. So there's something happening here, which I'm not sure I fully understand all the symbolism. But he cries against the altar, and then he's also going to give a prophecy where he's going to name someone. Now, we've seen prophecies where people are named. Can we think of another prophecy where someone is named?
Cyrus.
Cyrus is named. And so you have Cyrus who is named, and his prophecy is named in connection with what?
The fall of Babylon.
So the fall of Babylon, right? So it's gonna be about the end of Babylon, both the 70 years for Babylon and the 70 years in Babylon. Now, Josiah, what is his prophecy in connection with? We've already addressed it a little bit.
Is he not the one that was prophesied about?
Yeah, so Josiah is going to be prophesied about. So he's given as a prophecy, but this is going to be in connection with Ezekiel's prophecy regarding the siege of Jerusalem. So you can see that in both cases, the naming of this person in connection with a future prophecy is connected to issues dealing with Leviticus 26. That is, what's going to happen to Jerusalem. Both a prophecy dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem and a prophecy that's going to deal with the restoration of Jerusalem. And I think those are profound connections. Now the question is why? Why is God naming Josiah here? Why does he name Cyrus? And does it have any connection with our history? So that's something to think about. I'm not going to necessarily give the answer at this time, but I want us to think about this. Because I think in our history, we have made a prophecy where we named someone ahead of time. Okay, so there's going to be this prophecy about what's going to happen. There's going to be this sign where the altar is going to be rent. The ashes are going to be poured out. And in verse 4, it says, "And it came to pass when King Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of God, which he had cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, Lay hold on him. And his hand, which he had put forth against him, dried up, so that he could not pull it in again to him." So what happens with Jeroboam when he points forward, arrest this prophet? Could we say his hand was restrained?
I think that's possible.
Okay, so this is a restraint. That's one way we could look at it. Now, then the altar is going to be rent, the ashes poured out from the altar, according to the sign which the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. And the king answered and said unto the man of God, Entreat now the face of the Lord thy God, and pray for me, that my hand may be restored me again. And the man of God besought the Lord, and the king's hand was restored to him again before, and became as it was before. So what's happening here?
Listening.
So it's a loosening. We have a restraint and a loosening. And we have already addressed these restraints and loosenings in regard to Islam. But this isn't Islam, is it?
No.
So what is it? Because what's the symbol that's here? Now, there is a parallel idea in the scriptures. Because what does it mean that somebody's hand is withered or is dried up?
Well, that
It's
happened
unable
to
to function.
yeah, and that's what happened to the land when they didn't give the Sabbaths to the land.
Okay. Can you explain a bit more how? So the land dried up?
Yeah, well, I mean, they couldn't work the land. They couldn't do anything with it. God said they were not to be there and he took them away. And then he restored them after 70 years. Well, began to restoration.
Okay. Now, could this be a symbol of what happens to Israel? Okay, so this is Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. So here we have, now maybe this connection isn't quite as clear, but what does it mean, let thy right hand forget her cunning? Now this is, of course, her cunning is an addition, that's added. So this is about the right hand forgetting. But what does it mean that the right hand forgets?
It will have lost its use, so it's paralyzed.
Right, it's paralyzed, right? Yeah, so some use the word skill. Just looking at all these different parallel translations. My right hand ceased to function. So, I mean, that's the sense of what they're talking about here. And this is about the captivity. So it just goes on. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy, remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. So what is this talking about, this verse 7?
So the children of Israel, Edom,
Yeah.
when they seen that Jerusalem was besieged, they were very much, seemed to be enthusiastic concerning it, desiring it to take place.
Okay, so they're not really involved, but they're cheering it on.
Yes.
Okay, and notice the doubling. Now, maybe I'm making a stretch here, but can we look at 9/11 as a parallel in this context? Are the children of Edom, are they in any way connected to what we might call Islam today? As a symbol, not necessarily 100% genetically.
Well, Edom comes from the east.
Yeah, it's east of Jerusalem. And when 9/11 happened, what was the response in the Islamic world?
Joy.
Yeah, it was joy. Okay. Now, so maybe this is just me, sort of seeing a parallel where there isn't one. But I would say that there is some similarity, at least we should see some similarity between what's happening in the United States as God's people and the response of her enemies to what happened at 9/11. However we want to see this, whether we can take this passage here and apply it in some way very specifically, or whether we can just see it as a general example of that. Because the Americans weren't taken into captivity. It wasn't the end of the United States in that sense. But a change did occur in the United States at 9/11. 9/11 becomes an extremely important symbol. And the question is, can we connect the history of 9/11 to the history going back to 977? Now, 977, we're connecting with 1798, right? So that connection is clear. But can we take what's happening in 1798 and look at the later history of the United States and connect the rise of the United States with the end of the United States? Can we do that? Hopefully I haven't lost everyone, like literally.
What are you calling the end of the United States?
Well, we're at the end of the United States. Would we agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. And so the history that when the United States begins, it's going to say something about when it ends. And we're saying that United States parallels ancient Israel, and especially when it comes to this revolution, and also to the Civil War that's going to happen later. So I'm going to go here to these charts, see if I can find this quickly. Okay, so I'm going to share my PowerPoint here. So you should be able to see that quite easily, right?
I can.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
this is a pretty busy chart. Maybe I cleaned it up a bit just so there's less to look at here. Now we can see this date in 977 BC on the left. So I'm just going to zoom into this part just so people can see it better. So this 15th day of the 8th month is November 22nd, 977 BC. Now, if you use the rabbinic calendar, it's going to give you October 22nd, 977 BC. So we saw that as significant. But the Julian date is November 22nd and October 22nd. But the Gregorian date, if you had October 22nd, 977 BC, does anybody know what Gregorian date that would be? No, it's actually November 22nd, I think is what I have to go to. November 22nd. No, it's not working out. I'm doing something wrong. Or I'm remembering something wrong. So if I go back. Okay, November 22nd. Ah, that's it. So if I go to October 22nd, 977 on the Julian calendar, so that is if I take the rabbinic date, so I'm going to show people this so that they can see what I'm talking about. So I'll share this screen. Okay, what you're looking at is the calendar converter. Here you're going to see 977. Now, up above it says 976. Gregorian, that's just because in the Gregorian calendar for astronomy, if they're going to use astronomy dates, which really doesn't make much sense, because when they use astronomy, they use the Julian calendar, but they count a 0 year. So it's pretty confusing for people. Probably nobody really ever does it this way, except people who are either not astronomers or not historians. But anyway, if you look at October 22nd, you can see it's the 15th day of the 8th month on the rabbinic calendar. It's October 22nd, and it's also October 13th. So this was pointed out by Jeff, and the significance of October 13th is it connects to our history. That is the date that we marked for the midnight cry in 2018. Now, you can see in the biblical calendar, it's not the same date. So in order to go to the biblical calendar, the 15th day of the 8th month, it will be November 22nd, 977. So this would be the actual date, as close as we can count it, that we see Jeroboam offering on the altar in Bethel. Does that make sense to people?
That's an interesting point.
Okay. So now when we go back to this chart here, we have this date. This is the revolution. The revolution has occurred. And then you're going to have this counterfeit day of worship set up on November 22nd. Now, one thing we can note is in our history, November 22nd is the earliest that you can have a Thanksgiving in the United States. That is, Thanksgiving can be anywhere from the 22nd to the 28th of November. So, is this a Thanksgiving? As a symbol? And any thoughts on that? So that's what we're getting. What's that?
That's an interesting way of asking it. So yes, as a symbol, it could very well be.
Right. So the thing about, we're going to look at these different Thanksgivings. Now, a couple of things that I want to note is the structure of this line and some of the spans of time that are going to occur here. So first off, we have 235 years from November 22nd, from 977 BC to 742 BC. And 742 BC is going to start a period of 2,604 years that's going to end in 1863. So I probably should have that line here, connecting that to 1863, way over here. I just don't. But if we were to count here, and you have this civil war. Now, the Bible doesn't really tell us what happened with that counterfeit feast day, whether they continued to observe it throughout the history of northern Israel. We don't know. It doesn't mention it again. But if it did, 235 years would bring us to the fall of 742 BC, right? So that would bring us again to that. But whether we need to look at that or not, I don't know. Now, another thing that I'm looking at is this 235 years from the rebellion, even if I'm not counting from this feast day, but I'm just going to count from that year. I could have counted 235 years from the first day of the first month. And it's around that time that, because in my calculations, in my estimate, based upon what happens, how this war develops, how Jeroboam ends up becoming the leader of northern Israel, it would have had to happen very early in 977 BC that Solomon dies. And that you then have this division that happens in northern Israel, because the distances and the time involved would require that. He's going to have to set up these two golden calves in the north and the south of Israel after he has already won this battle to take the northern kingdom. And Rehoboam's going to be left with the southern kingdom. So somewhere around the beginning of the year, you're going to have that revolution. Now, 235 years, what I'm going to do is just go to the first day of the first month. And that's going to be from the time that you would count the kings of Judah, you would count their reign. And so 742 BC is the first year of Ahaz. That's in Isaiah chapter 7. And when you get to 723 BC, it's going to be 19 years later. We all know that there's 19 years. Now, 19 years is a Metonic cycle, and it's 235 months. So to count from the first day of the first month, or any day of any month in 742 BC to any day of any month in 723 BC, would be 235 months exactly. So we have a period of 235 years, followed by a period of 235 months. So what this is doing is connecting the rebellion with the civil war by this symbol of 235. Is that clear to people? Anybody have questions regarding that?
I think it's fairly easy to see it.
Yeah. And not everybody may be that familiar with the Metonic cycle, but it's just every 19 years, the calendar repeats. And it's a period of 19 years. We would think, well, 12 months, but there is 7 of those years has an extra month. And so if you just multiplied 12 by 19, you would get 228, I believe. And then you would just add the extra 7 months to that period of time. And that's why you get 235 months in 19 years. Now, we're going to have this huge leap here. So this is the revolution, as we are going to call it, between the division of the North and the South. And then you're going to have this civil war. Now, this civil war is going to end here about 3 years later. So 739 BC, you're going to have the end of the civil war. Some people put it at the end of 740 BC. But you're going to have 20 years, brings you to a period during the American Revolution. I mean, I could even go back to 742 BC, and that would bring me to like 1799. So we're in the midst of this American Revolution in a period of 20 years. So I've divided it up with these different periods of time, and people could say, well, these are kind of arbitrary dates that I've chosen. But the first one that I'm taking, because I'm focusing upon these feast days, is the first civil American Thanksgiving is August 9th, 1623. Now we know that they had their first Thanksgiving what year? When was the first American Thanksgiving that we would have in history?
1621.
Yeah, 1621, because we know the Pilgrims on November 9th spotted Cape Cod, right? They're going to go through that winter and then the spring, and then in that fall, they're going to have a Thanksgiving. So in 621, but that's not a civil Thanksgiving. So what we're interested in is Thanksgivings that are declared by the government, not by churches. And so the first one is August 9th, 1623. Now, the number of years between 723 BC and 1623 is 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Whether that's significant as a number or not, it's just definitely the numbers in the order that you would count, starting with 2. And then what I'm going to mark next is December 18th, 1777. Does anybody know what that is? Just think a little bit.
Is that the Continental Convention or something?
Okay, so this is in connection with the fact that they now have the Continental Congress, right? And so when we go here on this, it is proclaimed November 1st, American Thanksgiving. So this is the first Thanksgiving that's proclaimed after you have the formation of the United States. In this case, it's the Continental Congress of the United States. So it's 154 years from the first civil Thanksgiving to the first official American Thanksgiving. So this number 154, what's the significance of it?
It's 22 times 7.
It's 22 times 7.
And
Yeah.
inclusively, it's Samuel Snow's letters in days.
Yeah, it's also 77 times 2.
Yes.
Which is sort of kind of seems logical, but not all numbers work like that. So it's Samuel Snow's letters, inclusively counting from February 16th to July 18th. Okay. And then we're going to have a Thanksgiving on November 28th, 1782. So what would be the significance of this? I mean, it's a Thanksgiving, but what would be the significance of November 28th, 1782? Now I've marked it, 20 years from the end of the Civil War in Israel. But what do we notice, which I mentioned earlier? What's the earliest you can have a Thanksgiving?
22nd of
22nd.
November.
And the latest you can have a Thanksgiving?
28th.
The 28th, right? So you can see this would be the last or the fourth Thursday in November. And so that's the first time that they have the fourth Thursday in November being proclaimed as a Thanksgiving. So other times they might just, the first being observed on November 28th, 1782. So Thanksgiving and National Day of Prayer proclaimed November 5th, 1782, and the first being observed on November 28th. So it's the first time you have a civil Thanksgiving being placed as the fourth Thursday in November. Now, and then we're going to have 7 years later, it doesn't show that, but 7 years later, and again, you're going to have a Thanksgiving on the fourth Thursday in November. That's in 1789. Now, this is George Washington's Thanksgiving proclamation, October 3rd, 1789, for Thanksgiving observed on November 26, 1789. Now, they didn't have it set in stone at this time. That is, presidents would declare Thanksgivings. They'd make a proclamation, but there wasn't a set time. There wasn't an expectation that we're going to have a Thanksgiving at any particular time. So they would make a proclamation, and then there would be a date that's set then, and then that would be observed. So this becomes an interesting process. Now, we still have the Thanksgiving proclamations by presidents, even though you know when Thanksgiving is going to occur. And that's because it goes back to this history where the president would make a proclamation because you didn't know when Thanksgiving was going to be. Okay. Are people finding this interesting? First off.
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Because, I mean, I find it interesting and fascinating of what's happening here. Now, some of these things I put down as details. I wasn't necessarily sure what they all mean. But we're going to also have not just Thanksgivings that are proclaimed, but also national fasts. And this seems kind of like an odd thing. I mean, could you imagine the President of the United States saying, we're going to have a day of prayer and fasting on such and such a date nowadays? I mean, they would think he was insane, right? It wouldn't be something that would be done. But in that time, in that age, these things occurred. Now, you're going to see this national fast. And as far as I know, this is the first one that's in 1795. Why would they have this fast in 1795? Anybody know? I actually can't
Well,
remember.
you have maybe like the revolution kind of beginning around that time. You have
Well, they've had the American Revolution going on for a while. This is, and I probably need to look this up, but I can't remember. So there's stuff going on still. Like we just kind of think 17, at least as a Canadian, I always just think, well, 1776, United States began. But there's still a lot going on at this time in the formation of the United States. And so I'm not particularly, I don't remember what this particular fast was about. The thing that I noted is that it's on the 10th day of the 10th month, which is a symbol. But that could just be a coincidence. The only thing is, I've noted many times when January 1st is the 10th day of the 10th month. And so that's why it struck me. But I don't really know the significance of it. So you're going to have this fast is appointed for February 19th. So the fast isn't on January 1st. It's going to be on February 19th. But so I don't know how significant that is. And then you're going to have on January 1st, 1863, a national fast was appointed for April 30th. Now, in 1863, this is also what happens on January 1st. So I didn't put it on this sheet.
The Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, so the Emancipation Proclamation, and also this fast that was appointed for April 30th, which Ellen White basically recommends for Seventh-day Adventists to participate in this fast, which she didn't recommend, or she was cautioning against, in earlier fasts during the Civil War in 1862. There was also a national fast proclaimed, Day of Prayer and Fasting. And Ellen White says it was not according to God because of the sins of the North. But with the Emancipation Proclamation, this national fast then could be observed by Seventh-day Adventists. Now, we also know at this time, we see in 1863, we're going to have later in 1863, the formation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So this is right in the history where the Adventist Church is becoming a denomination. Now, the other interesting thing, and this is the one that's one of the main points, is Abraham Lincoln's proclamation on October 3rd for Thanksgiving, November 26, 1863. Now, October 3rd is the date in 2018 that Tess presented November 9th. So whether that's just a coincidence or there's some symbol connected there, I don't know. But the significance here is when Abraham Lincoln made this proclamation for the Thanksgiving to be on the 4th November or the 4th Thursday in November, it has continued to be the 4th Thursday in November, except for a very short time under, I think Theodore Roosevelt or someone like that. Maybe it was another guy. Maybe it was later.
I think it was under Franklin Roosevelt.
Yeah, maybe under Franklin, or it could have even been under Truman, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. But anyway, under one of the presidents, temporarily, they made it the last Thursday rather than the fourth. So it affected a couple of Thanksgivings, but they put it back to the fourth Thursday. So that's the only aberration. After Abraham Lincoln's proclamation, it became the standard. But still, the president would have to proclaim it every year. Now, what we have here is Trump proclaims November 23rd in 2017 as a day of Thanksgiving on November 7th. So he makes this proclamation on November 17th. Now, this is the first time that Trump makes a Thanksgiving Day proclamation. But he's going to make another one on November 22nd. Or there's going to be another, his second Thanksgiving is going to be November 22nd. And we made some predictions regarding that. So that's what we're looking at right now in trying to understand this. Now, so one thing is we can see that there's the first time you have the fourth Thursday of November. That's going to be Washington. And then when we finally get to November 26, 1863, we now have this regular pattern beginning. And it's a period of 154 years from 1863 to 2017. And we've already connected Lincoln to Trump in various different ways. So this is just one link. And we've made a lot of these connections and links separate from this since this. So since 2018, when I made this chart, we've made all kinds of different links. Now, we can see here November 26, 1863 to November 23rd, 2017. This is connecting Lincoln and Trump by a period of 154 years. And would we agree that 154 years is a symbol?
I would say it has to be.
Yeah, because it's 2 times 777. It's from Samuel Snow's letters. And now we also know that Trump is connected with sevens. And so a doubling of 77 is definitely something that connects Trump to Lincoln. So I don't think it's not something that I would say is trivial. And it's definitely not the main reason that we've been able to connect Trump to Lincoln. Right? So one is we're connecting the Seventh-day Adventist Church's rise in 1863 to our history. Now, 2017 is, of course, an important year within this movement. Lots happens in 2017. Now, we know that when did we first make a prediction regarding Trump that he was going to be the president of the United States? Does anybody remember?
January 2016.
Okay, so you're very specific about that. So who made that prediction January of 2016?
Well, Jeff made it in Lambert Church.
Okay, and why did he make that prediction? What was his reasoning?
Well, I think it was a study that, I think he'd been in Washington and somebody shared something to study with him. And that was when he first presented it.
Okay. So this study was about, do you remember what the study was about?
It was in Daniel 11, verse 2.
Okay, so we have Daniel 11, the beginning of Daniel 11. Now, people may not be aware what was happening in 2015 and even back in 2014. In the study of chronology, we were dealing with the end of the 70 years. And that is, we were trying to mark out exactly where these periods of 70 years were. And in part of that study, we had to deal with Darius and Cyrus and the kings of Persia. Now, even if you go back to 2015, we were already laying down the last seven, or the first seven kings of Persia, correct? So even before 2016, in 2015, we were looking at the kings of Persia.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. And I know specifically because Parminder was in Alberta in the summer of 2015, and we were addressing it then. So in 2015, I was discussing with Parminder, and he was just completely ignoring all the things I was saying. You know, he'd say, I don't understand what you're talking about. Now I know why, but at the time I was noticing all kinds of things dealing with this history, specifically when Cyrus came to the throne and when the decrees occurred and so forth. I was dealing with that history of the decrees. So in 2016, someone made the connection, and Jeff presents it in January of 2016. Now, when did Trump first make his announcement that he was going to run? And anybody know?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Sometime in 2015.
Yeah, it was sometime in 2015. And I sort of have a feeling there were people who were talking about Trump in this movement, not necessarily in connection with Daniel, but we were seeing that Trump somehow had a place in prophecy, even before we could place him in prophecy. So you say it was January in 2016. I sort of remember something about it before then. And I think even before Trump ran, I remember people talking about Trump. But so in my mind, it seemed to be that it went further back than that. But definitely Jeff would have.
Yeah, he began his campaign on June 16 or 15, 2015.
Okay.
So yeah, June 16. So it's actually his birthday.
Okay.
2015.
June 16th.
I think so. I think he would have been like maybe he'd been about 69 years old.
Yeah, because he's going to be 70 when he's elected.
His birthday's June the 14th. It's on Flag Day.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, June 14th. Yeah, 16th didn't sound right. June 14th. Yeah. Okay. So I still remember even before he ran, somebody talking to me about how Trump could be the last president. Like Trump needs to become the president in order for prophecy to be fulfilled. But definitely we had linked it by 2016 to Trump. Now at that time, Trump wasn't leading in the polls. I know that. Because who was leading?
I think it was Cruz, Ted Cruz.
Okay. I think it could have been Ted Cruz. I know also for a while we had the Adventist guy leading, but I'm not sure.
Ben Carson.
Yeah, Ben Carson. But when we made that prediction regarding Trump, I mean, that would pretty much be considered ridiculous.
Well, I don't think I think he was up there with the top nominees. Ted Cruz won the first primary.
Yeah.
And
the primaries when are the primaries? Aren't they in?
That was in February.
February, right? So I think as far as just polling numbers were concerned, definitely Trump wasn't up there yet.
I think he's up there, maybe in the top two.
You think so? I don't think he was, but my memory's not always the best. I know it for a while he wasn't really popular. It took time. His popularity grew as the campaign grew. So when exactly he became a popular candidate, I'm not sure. But But the point is, most people would not think that Trump would become president. There might be people who hoped he would, but I don't think there's many people would have put money down in January of 2016 that Trump's going to be president. Now, I was a little bit draggy as far as my feet following this whole thing, because I was of the view that, one is I didn't see how Trump could become president, to be honest. But also, I didn't know how prophecy was going to unfold. And so I said, well, you still could have, Clinton, she could become president, and you still could have prophecy fulfilled. But there was really a strong emphasis upon Trump. And many people in this movement, even though Jeff didn't make a definite claim that Trump would be president, there were many in this movement who did. Friends of mine who put it on Facebook, Trump's going to be the next president prior to the election. And he was. And for a lot of people in this movement, this was a powerful evidence that God was leading this movement. We can all agree on that part.
Do you remember why they believed that Trump would be the next president? Did they give any reasons?
Yeah, well, the reason had to do with the prophecy in Daniel 11, verse 1-4, and the kings of Persia. And we could see that Trump was being typified by Xerxes. And Xerxes has this campaign against Greece, and Greece represents the globalists. And Trump was opposed to the globalists. And of course, that was really the strongest argument for Trump over Clinton, because Clinton is a globalist. So we looked at Trump was going to win this election because that's the only thing that would make sense. Now, after Trump lost the second election, many people abandoned that view that Trump was the last president. I take the position that Trump still is the last president of the United States, and that what happened on January 6th was that the United States was taken over by the globalists. Okay, sorry about that. I got disconnected. Hopefully we can finish this off.
We pray.
Okay, so
While you were away for a moment, one of the points that that I had looked at that was kind of interesting, going back to this change in Thanksgiving that Roosevelt decreed.
yeah,
Okay, the history briefly was that retailers felt that the date for Thanksgiving in 1939 did not allow enough shopping days. And there were 23 states that agreed with Roosevelt and changed the date, even though it was much later. They couldn't change the calendar. And there's 23 states that didn't agree with Roosevelt, and 2 states that chose to keep both days.
oh,
But the date that Roosevelt chose for this change in Thanksgiving,
yeah,
biblically, was the 11th day of the 9th month.
oh, okay,
So we have another 9/11.
yeah, okay. Now, so my other computer is not connected, so I can't share the screen again, but what we're going to look at tomorrow is we're going to address specifically what the prediction was regarding November 22nd. And discuss that. But you can see that the foundation that we've laid here, it looks pretty sound. Would we agree with that?
Yes.
Like the premise is sound, and the connections between those histories and our histories are sound. The problem is going to be, can we nail down in the second year of Trump's presidency what happens in connection with November 22nd as something to do with fulfillment of prophecy? And was our prediction, were we able to predict the event and And did it have any meaning, right? That's what we want to look at. Now, and I'm going to point out the problems, because there are some weaknesses with the prediction as we made it. And one of the problems relates to the calendars. How do we know the biblical dates in that time? And what system are we using to determine it? And it's one of those times when it becomes sort of 6 of one, a half, and a dozen of the other. It's not as clear as it could be in making those decisions regarding the dates. The calendar converter doesn't help us because it doesn't actually deal with the calendar properly after the 7th month. So sometimes it's off. But we have to deal with these problems. And then also what was happening, which we've touched on a little bit, but we're going to go into more detail with what was happening in the movement and the significance of these events within the movement itself. And I think there's things that I missed in regarding to a hand being restrained and a hand being loosened. And that's one thing that we touched on again here today, was that this had to do with ancient Israel as a symbol, dealing with their captivity and their restoration. Would we agree with that the withering of the hand and the loosening of the hand is related to the captivity and restoration?
That's something that I'll have to think about, but it looks right.
Yeah, so those are the things that we're going to look at, trying to understand what those symbols were. And I think that was one of the problems that we had prior to November 22nd, was understanding those symbols. Now, just a note, so we're going to close with prayer right away. I'm going to have to put this video up late tonight. It's not going to be up right away because I actually have to piece together 2 different videos, because this part is being recorded on a different computer than the first part was. So I have to figure out how to do that. Plus I'm working all day. So I won't be home till 8 o'clock tonight. And it's going to take me probably a couple hours to figure all this out. So it's not going to, I mean, obviously anybody who's waiting for the video is not going to hear about this until now, until they're watching the video. But, you know, if you're looking for the video yourself to rewatch it, it's going to be a while. Any final comments before we close with prayer?
No, not from me.
Okay. Yeah, so it is an interesting study. It is pretty involved, and it's going to take us time to get through much of this. So let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we again thank you for all your blessings, for the time that we've had to study here, and that we were able to get as much in as we could with the internet not working well. So we just pray, Lord, that you can help these issues to be resolved for tomorrow morning for our study. And help us, Lord, to continue to grow and learn, and to recognize that you are leading this movement. Please lead and guide us individually. May your angels watch over us and care for us. And we pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.